Hi, welcome in everyone. Hello.
I love that theme music. That was so cool.
Well, I'm
I'm
terribly
like,
awkward at the beginning of these lives, so I was like, let me make a little video so there's a little gap
I was
there.
I was challenging Walter. I was doing a little chair dancing.
Nice.
Yeah.
All
Let's do a
right,
little,
welcome
let's do a
in.
little Walter, you know.
All right, welcome in everyone. Welcome to CounterStory Perspective with Dr. Eric, our favorite in-house MD expert, Dr. Eric. We love Dr. Eric. So as people are joining in, I'll just do a brief overview of what we do here on CounterStory Perspective. Our tagline is auditing the narrative one conversation at a time. So we're getting into existing societal narratives and digging into what's the truth underneath them. So today we're going to be talking measles and mayhem. Today we're going to be talking about the measles epidemic along with other epidemics that are now spreading across the United States. And we're going to get into the mayhem that's happening inside these detention facilities as it pertains to medical care. So, Dr. Eric, you want to sell yourself a little bit?
Hi everybody. Welcome to what the hell kind of Monday are we dealing with today? No, this is so I'm Dr. Eric Lullove. I'm the Chief Executive and Medical Officer of the West Boca Center for Wound Healing in Coconut Creek, Florida. Melissa and I have chatted a lot offline. This is a true treat for me because it's really our first conversation. So you guys get to see this unfiltered back and forth that Melissa
Yes.
and I are going to have, which is going to be fantastic. But so just for purposes, I am not a virologist. So I wrote this as a public health message and how we're going to deal with this. But you can find me here on Substack, and that's pretty much it. I have no paywall. Everything I do is for free. And I'm going to let Melissa take it away. It's her
All
show.
right. Yeah. So yeah, nothing here is medical advice or intended as medical
Nope.
advice. We're just discussing some of the medical things that are happening right here in the US and some of the things that we may not be hearing fully about because the CDC is not doing quite the reporting they used to, as well as all the other agencies involved that keep us abreast of what's going on. So I have like a personal connection to the measles
Ooh.
outbreak. The epicenter of the measles outbreak is literally my hometown. It's where my grandfather is from. It's where my best friend currently lives with her four children, all vaccinated, thank God. Um, but we're seeing this tremendous outbreak. And so I want to go back in time a little bit and talk about what I witnessed because I no longer live there, but I did live there. And around 2015, 14, 15, 16, I was a part of the evangelical church community, and there was a homeschool co op that was hosted at our church. So there was this overlap of these very insulated communities within that church community. And I remember when all of a sudden these people who were just like me, who had taken their kids to get vaccinated as babies, started rejecting that, and there started to be pseudoscience floating around the community, which led to almost a vilification of vaccinating. Like if you did vaccinate your kids, you were the outcast, there was something wrong with you. And obviously I was having lots of other concerns about that community at that time, but I remember then thinking, how is this going to impact these kids if these highly communicable diseases break through this insular community? And now we're seeing that is exactly what's happened. The homeschool community there is the epicenter of the epicenter, I guess you would say. Spartanburg County, South Carolina is the epicenter of this epidemic, and the homeschooling community within that is
Crazy.
is
It's
just
just
raging. So what do you say? And I know you're not a virologist, but what do you say just in casual conversation when you hear these anti-vaccine claims?
Do you want to know what's in my inner monologue or what I say verbally?
Both, because I'm pretty sure what you got going on up here.
Okay. I mean, personal opinion, not medical opinion. My own personal is like, what the fuck are you people thinking?
Yes.
Like, and this goes back to not that I want to draw the whole pro-life thing into this, but like you can't be a good Judeo-Christian and say you're pro-life and then not vaccinate your kids.
Right.
Okay,
That's
like
exactly what I thought.
it's logically inconsistent to sit there and spout teachings of Judeo-Christian, dogmatic religion, and then sit there and say, "But I'm not going to vaccinate my kids because I think they believe in natural immunity." Well, the last time people believed in natural immunity, I believe 1/3 of the European continent was killed off in the 1200s.
Right.
Right, and then keep in mind, there's a reason why we haven't seen polio, we haven't seen mumps, now we're seeing measles again. There's actually rubella coming back, right?
Oh my God.
We have a very simple vaccine that has worked for decades.
Right.
The MMR vaccine. This is the one thing that we all got as kids. I remember going to the public health department in Michigan, and they had it was like the big M4 machine pistols that they used to inject you with, right?
Yeah.
Remember those?
Yes.
And now it's just a TB needle done and it's all over. But we have a simple vaccine that has a 100% success rate. But
Well, not just that, I find it interesting that when you're active duty military, the first day, your first full day that you are in boot camp, you get loaded up. You go down this gauntlet, and there's doctors on both sides with needles, and they hit you. And so it strikes me as odd that the same regime that thinks that the public shouldn't be vaccinated simultaneously does believe that the military should be vaccinated. So that right there is enough of a hypocrisy to really raise my eyebrow.
This deconstruction of the public health sector. Forget the fact that the entire administration is deconstructing the entire administrative state to begin with, right?
Right.
What was really the whole purpose of developing the federal government, right? Back in 1789, it was to wage war or protect the homeland, right? And
yes.
To raise taxes to pay for that.
Right.
It wasn't, and to negotiate whatever trade there was with Europe and neighboring countries. That was pretty much it. As we've progressed through history, our short 250-year history, right? It's about, I think, the 4 pillars that I think we all agree with, right? It's stay out of my house, stay out of my life, don't fuck up my money, and keep me safe. Right. That's pretty much basic, right? I call those the basic commandments of government.
Yeah.
Just let me live. Stay out of my bedroom.
Even in those times, Washington insisted that the troops be inoculated.
Mm-hmm.
Through the very primitive method that they were using then, that you actually opened the skin and introduced a live culture.
Prior to, I'm going to say 2012, it was mandatory that you had to be inoculated to work in a hospital. Even if you were an outpatient physician, you had staff privileges at a facility.
Yeah.
You had to be vaccinated.
That makes sense.
It wasn't until, I think it was like 2012, where they started allowing physicians to opt out of hepatitis B and the flu vaccines.
And why would they?
Like, I can understand flu because some doctors just would rather just get the flu virus and have the natural immunity, and I get that.
Right.
Flu's not going to kill the normal human being, right? It only kills the immunocompromised. But as a surgeon, like, hell no, I'm going to take the Hep B vaccine. I got more chances of getting stuck in getting hepatitis B than I am with HIV, believe it or not. Like, the risk of a needle stick for HIV is like 0.05%, but the risk of getting hepatitis is like 38%.
Oh, wow. That's an enormous difference.
Huge difference. Like, the really risk, because HIV is more sexually transmitted in its process. Like, it's, even though it's blood, the risk of getting it through a needle is very low. Most of the sexually transmitted diseases that you get from needle stick is going to be more hepatitis. More drug addicts die from hepatitis than they do HIV.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I wanted to talk about the sheer numbers of what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
So to frame where we are now, in the year 2000, we declared that the measles were eliminated in the US. The only new cases that occurred were when someone contracted that disease outside of the US and brought it in. But at that time, the vaccination levels were so high among the general population that it didn't spread.
So can we talk about that real quick? before we
Yeah.
get into the numbers. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, because this brings up the conversation of herd immunity,
Yes.
right? So into the year 2000, what number would you guess? And I'll even put it as a poll to everybody watching. Okay,
Hmm.
give me a number as to what you think our immunity level was to MMR in 2000.
You mean, what do you mean by immunity level? Do you mean people
Nationwide immunity
vaccinated or
percentage, the vaccinated
um
percentage nationally, and like I would even let's just I can't see
60?
the chat, so let's see what people are throwing out there as far as numbers. Like what
Let's see,
percent?
60%. 75, 90. That's what I'm seeing in the chat.
Okay, so remember, in order to get community prevention of community spread of any contagious disease, you must have at least 95% of a community vaccinated. That's what
Oh,
they call
wow.
that's what they call herd immunity. In the year 2000, our national vaccine rate for MMR was at 95.7%.
Okay.
Okay.
A good developed country. Yes.
Okay. In Europe, it's closer to like 99%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now you can go ahead and let's see what
Okay.
the go ahead. I wanted to give
I
everybody
can't.
the background of where we are then and now where we are. And this is how
Right.
politics have affected what we do now
So
and what we're
we have a graphic showing the infection rate, and I want you to look at where we are in comparison to past years. So this little graph showing where we are
so sad.
currently,
This is so
so
sad.
we can extrapolate out how the rest of this chart is going to go for the remainder of this calendar year. And I saw this graphic, and I don't normally make Lawrence do all this extra work of showing graphics and stuff, but this is astonishing. I think
This
this
is
tells a story that is super frightening. I
oh yeah.
have people in my house who our whole household is vaccinated. But a question I wanted to ask you again, I know you're not a virologist. If someone is elderly, 65, 66 years old, should they be re-vaccinated?
So you can do what's called an MMR titer. Simple
Okay.
blood test, and it's just like with hepatitis B, and you can do your titer levels. And if you are
Okay.
below a certain threshold number, depending on the reference laboratory, you can get a booster.
Okay. Yeah, I want that information to be out there because looking at these numbers and thinking about vulnerable people in my own house and my own neighborhood, this is some information I want to share if we're looking at spike levels like this. And unfortunately, in my state, Virginia, we are listed as one of the spike level states because we do have the western half of the state that has become anti-vaxxers
Just
and
to put this chart in perspective for people who like have a hard time reading graphs. So on average in 2025, we were averaging about 189 cases per month. Okay. We're at 933 and we're at 6 weeks into February, or 6 weeks into 20. If we extrapolate this out at the current rate that it's going, we're looking at over 10,000 cases of measles this year. That's 500% increase.
so along these lines, I want to talk about the national security aspect of why we are concerned about public health. Why are we concerned about the diseases spreading? Well, if I'm vaccinated, my family's vaccinated, listen, what how concerned should I actually be? I want to talk about a little project called Dark Winter. Dark Winter was a 2001 senior level national war game, and it was intended to examine the national security, intergovernmental, and information management challenges of a bioterrorism attack on the US homeland. Okay. It was conducted just 80 days before 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unfortunately, I believe this study got a little bit buried when 9/11 happened, and there wasn't a lot of talk about it. But when we talk about bioterrorism, people sometimes think that means like spraying the population with some random chemical or using chemicals in the water or
Like
something like
anthrax.
that. But that's not what was used
Remember
here.
we had the anthrax scare too. Remember during the Obama
Yes,
years,
and
it was like
anthrax.
yeah.
Right. But that wasn't what was used in Dark Winter. What was used in Dark Winter was smallpox, and smallpox was intentionally spread in this simulation throughout the levels of government. So what this war game, because that's what we call these scenarios, what this war game demonstrated was not just what could happen to the general population, but what can happen to the intergovernmental structures if you take out a significant number of people with an illness. You
Mhm.
don't even need to use some sort of anthrax or chemical. You can spread illness biologically, and you can do massive damage and dismantle the inner structures of government if you have a very, very contagious disease. I want to pause here to say that measles is 6 times more contagious than COVID. So what we saw with this war game is you can use existing illnesses without having to get into chemical warfare to effectively cripple a nation. So I found it interesting that this war game was, uh, as it was played out, it played out with a simulated attack on the pharmaceutical industry, disrupting the flow of vaccines. But I found what happened, because I'm going to call it. I'm going to call what happened. What happened was a propaganda campaign. So you don't have to mess with the pharmaceutical industry. You don't have to worry with interrupting supply chains if you just make people believe they don't need that vaccine in the first place. So what we saw, I believe, is a similar biochemical attack as was played out in Dark Winter in 2001. But instead of worrying about supply lines or anything that requires a lot of infrastructure attack, it was quite easy to go the propaganda route. You just sell the public on propaganda
Right.
and you achieve the same, obviously the same result.
What was the show that was on TNT a few years ago? And it was about the worldwide epidemic, and it was one destroyer, one U.S. destroyer that survived the whole thing. It was,
Oh,
it
I didn't
was,
see that.
oh my God. If somebody in the chat can remember it, it was very recent, and it starred one of the Baldwin brothers. Adam Baldwin was one of the, it was basically, it was basically a U.S. warship. It was a destroyer.
Last ship.
Last ship. That's it.
Yeah.
That was basically a bioterror that wiped out the entire planet. And they wound up having the cure on the ship, and we're trying to go around the world, around the country, and like the U.S. had been taken over, and it was like really dystopian. But it was
Yeah, and I think
same
that's the
idea.
way we picture these biochemical attacks happening. We
Yeah.
picture these sweeping, rapid changes that attack infrastructure, and that's not how this played out. This played out in propaganda and information warfare. So it's startling to look back at that. This was there's an article about it on the U.S. Naval Institute website talking about Dark Winter and how we have seen exactly the same end result as what happened in Dark Winter, but without infrastructure attack, which is super, super alarming. So you're talking about
Yeah.
national security issues
It,
that have been caused by propaganda that originated right here in the United States.
which is why this is so important, because while Melissa's talking about how it affects on the national security apparatus, I don't think people truly understand how the public health service is one of the pillars of our national defense. Like,
It is.
having proper public health care in not just vaccinations, but in prenatal care and preventive medicine and functioning emergency departments, and all these things are part of our infrastructure of public health national defense. And by not vaccinating our kids and having these numbers drop below these levels that prevent herd immunity puts a gaping hole in our national defense network. And to this administration's admission, by design, they are willing to blow a hole right through this whole thing. They're willing to let people die, let our kids die. Okay. For what? To deconstruct the CDC, to deconstruct the NIH, to deconstruct HHS?
Right.
For what purpose other than to make America sick?
Weak. Make America weak.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mawa.
Make America weak again. Right.
Mawa.
Exactly.
Mawa.
Because I don't see how this benefit, and what
It doesn't
really
benefit.
strikes me, well, what strikes me is really curious about this is that this is almost exclusively a far right wing problem.
Yeah.
These are far right wing families that have chosen not to vaccinate their kids. And now we have children dying of measles. And what's truly, this shows how successful this propaganda campaign was. When you have that child die in Texas and her parents go on national television and say they would do the same thing again and they will not vaccinate their other kids, they would not vaccinate her if they had it to do again. I mean,
really.
what do you make of that? Like, that's
So this comes down to drinking the Kool-Aid, being very uneducated about what's best for your kids. And here's the statistic, here's the stat that should just drive everybody insane, okay? That 18% of all infected children under the age of 5 when they contract measles will require hospitalization. You're talking about 1/5 of all the kids. So let's just assume that we're at the same track where we are today, okay? We're going to have 10,000 cases. We're talking about 2,000, minimum 2,500 kids will be hospitalized in the U.S. this year for a very preventable immunizational type of disease process, okay? Now, here's where it gets really interesting, okay? So Melissa said earlier, so the replication rate of measles is by that of COVID. So when one person got infected with COVID, the replication rate of COVID was only to like 3 or 4 other people. Very slow replication rate, okay? With measles, it has a replication rate of 12 to 18. 400% of that of measles. So if one child in one school gets measles, it can replicate and wipe out an entire school inside of a week.
Oh my God.
Okay. Now, forget the fact that we're talking about loss of education, loss of time, some of these kids being in the hospital, whatnot, hear not, what see not, right? Hear no evil, smell no evil, see, right? Now there's a financial burden on all this that the school districts have to come up the money with for the local health departments to deal with this problem. One school, wiping out a school for one single outbreak can run upwards of anywhere between $150,000 and $200,000 for one school in one district. Now, I don't know about, like, I'm in Palm Beach County schools where I live. There's 160 schools in one county. I've got a huge populated county.
Wow. Yeah.
Imagine a bigger district like Miami-Dade, Broward, New York City School District, Spartanburg, Columbia, Dallas, Fort Worth. You start spreading this out, this literally becomes a national security problem because now you're diverting funds for wherever you're supposed to use them for now to epidemic and pandemic based. And this is why the Biden administration pumped out so much money for pandemic relief. Because
every city you just mentioned has an international airport.
Yep.
Every single city you just mentioned.
Viruses
and so whether or not you're a traveler, those kids in those elementary schools have parents who are TSA agents, who are air traffic controllers that work at that local airport.
And remember, viruses don't need a valid passport or a visa.
Yeah.
They don't. They're just a carrier pigeon. They just kind of fly along the wing and they're there. I mean, viruses don't know borders. Contrary to the Trump administration, remember what happened in Trump 1, right? Okay, we're talking about an administration that fast-tracked the Moderna viruses, the Pfizer virus, the J&J, vaccines, right? They fast-tracked all this. Operation Warp Speed. He was all over taking all kinds of credit for getting these vaccines out and saving millions of people's lives. Seriously, okay? Even though Florida alone had 1 million deaths, okay? Because of, I'm not going to get into the whole mask issue because that's just a whole nother argument with people, but it was more about just the open access of Florida and southern states and people flocking from everywhere because it was, people didn't want to stay cooped up in their homes. I get it. But let's turn the clock back. In 2016, what was one of the first executive orders that Trump did, which was he repealed the National Pandemic Task Force. So this was
Yeah.
the so what people don't understand is the National Pandemic Task Force is a group of physicians, virologists, epidemiologists, biotechnicians, bioscientists that literally travel around the world to wherever there's an epidemic, okay, and they squash it at point ground zero. Okay, military has this. The U.S. Army has their own. Remember the movie Contagion?
Yeah.
That's the same idea, right? So imagine if we all remember the Obama administration. What was the big virus back then? There were two of them. It was Zika virus and Ebola.
Yeah.
Okay, both got squashed in Europe. Yeah, I'm sorry, both got killed in Africa. Done. I think there were a couple of Zika viruses that got into Miami, but there was no spread. They actually shut it down. Now comes first Trump administration. They had early cases of COVID hitting the Western U.S., cases hitting New York City, and they didn't shut it down. There was nothing, no conversations with the Chinese government. There was no pandemic task force available to go to Wuhan to shut the lab down and they try to get this squashed. And what wound up happening? Worldwide pandemic, things that we hadn't seen since 1908. And how many people died worldwide?
Millions, billions.
Well, it was about.
Was it billions?
It was about 1 billion. No, it was about 500,000, 500 million.
Yeah. So
I'm going to double check that real quick, but
when I just can't wrap my head around because another fact beyond that with these families with kids getting measles, and like you said, 1 in 5 requires hospitalization, is that now we have however many millions of families that have been kicked off the ACA or can't afford the payments for the ACA. You've got red states without the Medicaid expansion. So what kind of financial burden is this going to be on these families when their child contracts this? This is what I just can't wrap my head around is the targeted, it feels like hyper targeted propaganda directed at Trump's base. These were the biggest non-vaxxers. This was the biggest sort of concentration of this anti-vax movement is his very own base. I guess I'm like a little bit confused. What is the purpose of essentially dropping a nuke into your own base? They're not going to be able to afford the hospital bills. They live in red states that don't have Medicaid expansion.
right.
They've been kicked off their ACA and they haven't vaccinated their child. So when that kid gets that disease,
I only have one answer for that. Is they don't fucking care.
It's hard not to think that. It's really hard not to think that. Yeah.
We don't fucking care.
Right.
This is like looking at people on a spreadsheet and they're just, we can thin the herd. We can thin out population. I think they look at this like a spreadsheet and they see the very low income, poor parts of the country as a write-off line item.
Right. I'm starting to think the same exact thing because the same trends that liberals have reported on for years that, hey, you guys use more Medicaid, you use more welfare, you use more state benefits than any blue state. Okay. Maybe your own leadership sees that too. You ever thought that maybe the people that get you to vote for them also realize what we realize is that you guys are milking off the system more than anyone else? And a way to eliminate that.
I mean, the state of Kentucky that receives more funds than any other state in the country when Mitch McConnell was senator. I mean, He funded more money. He funneled more government money into Kentucky than any other red state. And the state that really needed the most was Mississippi.
Oh my, it's so hard because when we try to have conversations with conservatives or with MAGA, because I'm not even going to say they're traditional conservatives, but when we try to have these conversations, we're coming from a point of trying to show them this exact information. Hey, they don't want you to vaccinate your kids because they don't want you to have kids, really, because you're on food stamps. And that's federal dollars that they can cut from your kid's mouth if your kid's mouth doesn't exist anymore.
We have so many. And I've said this on multiple streams, multiple posts, that we have very serious problems, but we we have the most unserious people in positions of leadership to deal with those problems.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and it's this is serious shit. I'm not even talking about the vaccine. Forget everything else that we're dealing with. Forget the accountability on the Epstein files and the crap that's going on with Denmark and Greenland and Venezuela and Cuba, that Arturo's been amazing at reporting on what's going on in Cuba, and
Yeah.
you know, all the distraction shit going around the world. I mean, you haven't heard anything about Taiwan lately, right? Remember
Right.
that was like, right? Okay. All this crap, and what it's really all about has been the grift, hiding from the American people, no accountability, making America sicker, making Americans dumber. They want us dead. Actually, I don't think they want us dead. They just want us sick. They want us sick, broke, and uneducated.
Because we can't fight back then. Yeah,
Intelligent, educated people fight back. You don't have to have money to fight
that's
back,
correct.
but you can be educated, and you can have your wits about you and your health. And
Yeah.
they don't want any of that, because that means that there's opposition, there's resistance,
Right.
and when there's resistance, there's truth,
Yes.
and
So
that's what they're
I'm
afraid
gonna
of. They are so
I'm
afraid of the
gonna
truth.
They are. That I want to. That's why all of our platforms are being throttled the way they are. That's why, we've been essentially, I call it electronically kettled. We've been pushed off of kettling, this protest sort of
Yeah,
thing that cops do, where they corral you in an area. So they've pushed us off of Twitter long ago, and now they've pushed us off Meta, all the Meta platforms. And so they really have us electronically kettled here to Substack and YouTube is really the
but
last two.
eventually the truth always comes out. The truth always
Yeah.
hits hard, especially when it's, and with everybody that has been so vocal on here. And I'm not gonna, I mean, there's so many people that I listen and subscribe to and support, and I appreciate everybody that's read my stuff and supports me. And I think the best way that we can do, which is what we've been doing, is supporting each other,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And to go back, so I did that research. So it's the worldwide 95% estimates on
Hmm.
probability estimates is anywhere between 19 and 36 million that died from COVID worldwide,
Jesus.
which,
6
in the
million.
grand scheme of things, when you're talking about, 5 billion people in the world, it's not a lot of people, but those are people. And
Those are
listen,
people.
my oldest stepson is an anesthesiologist in New York City. So he was at Lenox Hill Hospital when this thing was hitting ground zero in New York, and they were piling up body bags in
Oh.
trucks on 72nd Avenue, on 72nd Street in Manhattan, and they were putting all the bodies in semi trucks outside the
Hmm.
hospital, because and they didn't know how to treat this. They were trying to figure out everything under the sun. I remember sending him supplies. I was sending him, like basically like biohazard suits that I could get through Medline, because I had, I was able to do all that stuff. And we had no gloves. We had a shortage on
Yeah.
gloves. We had a shortage on PPE equipment. Why? Because the Trump administration killed the PPE initiative.
Hmm.
So just to kind of give everybody an idea on what things cost back then. So I could get a box or case. I could do a case of 2,500 gloves, nitrile regular examination gloves. It was about $121 for a case. During the pandemic, it went to $400.
Oh my God. Oh my
And
God.
that's not including having gowns and masks
That's
and
obscene.
face shields and safety glasses, and I mean, they were giving the vaccines for free. I became a vaccine center. I became a testing center. I had to flip my office. I couldn't see patients. So
Yeah.
I turned into a testing center and a vaccine center. I was
That's
able to pivot,
incredible.
thank God,
Yeah.
but that's
And
the
we don't
reality.
even, when we talk about the numbers, so I'm going to tell you a personal story. I'm adopted and found my birth family through DNA testing.
That's great.
And when I found my biological father, he was in a nursing home in South Carolina, and because it was in during the pandemic, they weren't allowing outside visitors. So I was like, okay, I'll go meet him after the pandemic is over, or better, or something. But unfortunately, he he died before I could do that. And when I received his death certificate, because I was only the last remaining, person, so I was able to get his death certificate, and I really struggled with that death certificate,
Mm.
as did a lot of other people in the South that had families in nursing homes, because for you to say that he died of respiratory failure during a pandemic, but you didn't want to put COVID. So I did a little bit more digging and asking around. And, South Carolina was one of those places where it wasn't real. It was a hoax. It was all a hoax. You didn't have to wear a mask. Masking was, you couldn't breathe through a mask, all this ridiculous shit. And so what I ultimately found out was that they had very lax standards at this nursing home, and the kitchen staff, the janitorial staff, none of them were masking, and none of them were taking the proper precautions, and 263 senior citizens died in this nursing home system. Almost none of those deaths were formally attributed to COVID. So when we look at those numbers, so we look at
That,
19 to
that's
36
that's like
million.
literally criminal behavior. That's
Right.
criminal. That is like, I don't want to say criminal. That's too much of an indictment, but it's literally public health malpractice.
Right. So when I look at that information, it's difficult for me to really wrap my head around how many in these red states, where even physicians, even doctors were with this MAGA mindset, that didn't put COVID on those death certificates. And if we're really honest about what that number is, if you take into account the people who didn't want to put COVID for whatever reason
Oh,
on the
it's
death certificate, I'm afraid that it would be a much higher number. Yeah.
so I want to use this as a segue because you said physicians that are vaccine deniers.
Hmm.
Okay. So for those of you that don't know, the reason why the CDC is doing all this shit, and I'm going to call it shit because it's shit medicine. Okay.
Hmm.
So there is the Advisory Committee of Immunization Practices that RFK pretty much fired everybody that was on from the Biden administration and the previous Trump administration, by the way, and put on all of his anti-vax cohort schmucko doctors. How these physicians still have practices and licenses, I have
Yeah.
beyond, right? So this is called the ACIP. And this was big news about last month when they revised the immunization schedule for children.
Hmm.
Okay. And the primary function of that advisory committee is to protect children, is to give them a vaccine schedule that you heard all the buzz that the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Infectious Disease Society of America and the American Academy of Family Practitioners all disagreed with the recommendations from the ACIP. Okay. So those recommendations now have filtered down into the detention facilities, because I know you
Yeah.
wanted to talk about this, right?
Yes.
So here's what's happening. So in the detention, and I had to do a lot of research digging for this. This is stuff that honestly I was digging deep. This was like deep, dark
They are
web.
not making this public
No.
information. No.
Okay. So there's a website called the Project for Government Oversight that actually did some of this data research punneling for me, and I want to give them the proper credit. So in detention ICE facility inspection reports published in 2025, there was a 37% decline from the previous year. So there's less inspections, and there's
Hmm.
probably even less this year. Okay. And as a result of that, what's happening is that the facilities are not even meeting a range of detention standards,
Yeah.
including fundamental health and safety conditions, and as whether or not they're even doing functional healthcare monitoring and preventing suicide, quality food, and shelter. There was a post that somebody put out earlier, I think it was yesterday or today, about they're deliberately starving children and then giving them spoiled food so that it makes
Yes.
them even sick, right? I mean, this is like depraved shit. These are human beings. Right?
Yes.
We treat
Yeah.
our prison population better than this. Like you're
Yes.
better off being a convicted felon serving prison time because you know you're going to get at least fed.
Yeah.
Right? Versus being a detained, nonviolent,
Yeah. Or a child.
person, right? Child who had, whatever. And so the agency, DHS, is supposed to be doing these inspections twice a year at minimum. And
Hmm.
then for any facility that has an average of what they call 10 or more daily population of non-citizens, right? They're supposed to be doing this twice a year for longer than 72 hours. They're supposed to be inspecting them at least once in that 72-hour period. So that's not even being done. These people are being denied health care. And I think I had written in a post, or I think it was in my article as a post. I don't remember. I'm so busy lately. I can't remember what I've written. But like literally where they're not even delivering, like the VAs actually, they were doing all this through in 2025. All of the services were being done through the VA choice program and contracting outside physicians to go and do it. So they haven't been paying those claims since June of last year. So all of the outside physicians that were going in and doing the services and supposedly had gotten, we're supposed to be billing the VA choice care program for the services, haven't been reimbursed at all. They've actually just
imagine Trump not paying his bills. That's probably the first time, right?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, and let's not forget too that, and I know that the you being a veteran as well, me too. Okay, and Nick and everybody else, and Evan, and everybody else that we speak to on a regular basis here, they cut VA funding again.
Yep.
They literally cut all of them. I know. Chris first talked about this extensively, that they have literally cut the VA mental health service program specifically. So there's like almost zero mental health now for our veterans. Yeah, that's called taking care of.
And I also don't think it's I don't think it's an accident that they've cut mental health care and are actively recruiting veterans to go into ICE. So you're taking people who are potentially mentally unstable, giving them weapons,
giving them a weapon,
and letting them loose on the street.
With 47 days,
and then we wonder why people are getting shot.
With only 47 days of training.
How many of these guys out here are having flashbacks to Baghdad while they're actively patrolling our streets? So I wanted to read off what we have verified. These are all, events that have been verified. Children being served food with worms in it. Deaths due to detainees with pre-existing conditions who just didn't receive their medication. Violent altercations leading to injury and death, like the detainee that was choked to death. Detainees not being given water and then told to drink the water out of the toilet, and then having to do so because they went over 48 hours without receiving fresh water. Overcrowding. Feminine hygiene. Women were given diapers instead of hygiene products, and then not given a place to dispose of those diapers. So they had to stack them in a corner and remain in the room with that material. And then full on torture, like the box at Alligator Alcatraz, where they would chain human beings in a 2x2 box and place them out in the sun in Florida. You have dangers of communicable diseases. There is the physical aspect of sleeping on concrete under 24/7 lights. The temperature regulation falls under the Geneva Convention. They are freezing, or in Florida, leaving them without air conditioning. And then the injuries at the hands of ICE during the detainment that's not properly treated. People have had broken bones that were not treated. And then dietary, where they're either given inadequate or moldy food, but diabetics or others with special dietary needs are obviously not receiving that. And so they are succumbing to illness or even death purely off of the food.
They're going into diabetic ketoacidosis in these facilities. And by the way, Alligator Alcatraz is still open, regardless of the court orders that have ordered it shut down.
Still functioning.
DeSantis still has it open for business on the website. I mean, this is inhumane shit. This is the stuff that we did to our Japanese Americans that were living here in the 40s. This is no different than what the Nazis did to the Jews in Germany and Poland, in Austria and Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, and
right. Like, how do you not call them death camps?
They're
with
death
that
camps.
Going on.
They're death camps. Well, now they're called death buildings because they're all basically buildings.
Right.
They're not a camp, right? Like we saw like in World War II. These are buildings.
Hmm.
These are warehouse buildings and thankfully, I think this has been percolating because I've seen multiple videos online of citizens going to these local zoning board meetings and saying, no, do not permit the government
Yes.
to access these buildings, or we're not going to issue the permit for that use.
Yes, we
So
did that here in Florida. Here in Virginia, there was a proposed, it was a former Amazon warehouse that had been purchased by a private LLC, and they were going to sell to DHS, and people came out in droves. They came to the city council
good
meeting,
for
they came to
them.
zoning meetings. They came out and said no, and the owner of the building, who it still hasn't been made public who that is, pretended that they just didn't know that that's what DHS would do
Okay.
with that building. But
Okay.
regardless, they did stop the sale.
And
So
the
it
same thing
stopped the
happened up
sale.
here in Jupiter, Florida. They did the same thing. They shut it down.
Yeah.
The
And
zoning
now we're
board said we're not
facing and now we're facing another challenge, because what we're learning sort of piecemeal in Hampton Roads, we've had a lot of ICE activity just surge in the past 2 weeks. And there is a facility right across the border in North Carolina
Mm,
where, okay, so the sale of the Virginia property didn't go through. They've now pivoted to this property that's an hour away, which is still a very convenient driving distance for our region. So what we're being warned by people in other parts of the country that have had these ICE infiltrations is, if you've got a camp nearby, your city is fucked. You are about to get overrun. If there's not a facility nearby, they will pivot to another region where they do have a closer facility. So now we have a flood of people going down to North Carolina to speak at those city council meetings and those zoning board meetings. Because if we can just keep a detention center from being established here, we may protect our city from more of an onslaught than we've already seen.
so from a public health perspective, think about what this does on the public health side. You're breeding disease
Yes.
and sickness and illness and, you know, people rotting and dying in those cages and seeding God knows what other diseases that they're going to get while they're in detention, right?
Right.
So, like, at what point, and this is going to be the compassionate side of me coming out, right? As much as this angers the fuck out of me, right? Sorry, everybody. I had to say it. It does anger the fuck out of me as a
It's true.
physician, as a human being, as part of a people who this went through. You know, I mean, thankfully my family got out of Italy, you know, before all this happened. But just on these are human beings. We treat our pets better.
Yes.
Like, at what point is this even acceptable? And I don't care where you live. This is the least Judeo-Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu fucking thing you can do. So don't take your religion and shove it up your ass. Because this is
Yeah.
don't sit there and preach your religious principles and say, oh, this is the Christian thing. No, it's not. The Christian thing to do would be to give out charity, to house these people, to feed them, clothe them, take care of them, make sure they get better, and be a good Christian, or be a good Jew, and fuck you. You
Yes.
know what?
Yeah. Mom Donnie had a speech a couple
Sorry,
days
everybody.
ago
I had to get that
where
out. It was just welling
no,
up. It just, you know.
yeah. Yeah, these are people. And Mom Donnie had a speech a couple days ago where he quoted the Torah, the Bible, the Quran, and a couple of other religious books, but he quoted like five religious texts prefacing his signing of an executive order that they are not going to allow ICE in New York City, because they are not going to stand by
Right.
and watch people treated inhumanely. That goes against all of these six religions that he
So
quoted.
at what point do local police departments, at the direction of the mayor's office or the county commissioner's offices or even the governor,
Hmm.
say, if you see ICE activity violating any one of our citizens, you are to intervene? I mean, at what point does that ever happen? Do we
See,
ever
we're
get to that?
dealing with this right here because Hampton Roads is 7 cities on top of each other. Most of the cities have police departments and sheriffs that are completely complicit with ICE. We know they're working with them. We have evidence. We have submitted FOIA requests, and some of them are denying it, but we have photographic evidence that they are. But one, the sheriff of Portsmouth, Virginia, started making public statements almost a year ago that he had nothing to do with ICE. He was not elected to work for ICE. His department didn't work for ICE. They work for the Constitution, the amendments therein, and the people that elected them. Point blank, period. He made his statement like multiple times on NPR, on local, in local forums. So, guess where ICE just somehow seems to not be active right now?
Richmond,
It's
Virginia.
the one city that had a man with the balls to stand up and say, no, I work for the people of my city. They have elected me as the enforcer of the Constitution and the related amendments. And that is what we are going to do. And now we see police or ICE all around Portsmouth, Virginia, but they're not going in there and pissing off that sheriff. So what I'm telling people now, if you haven't had ICE activity around you, get with your sheriff. Get
Hmm.
your sheriff to make public statements stating unequivocally, because here in this state, we've had a governor that just signed an executive order that our police departments aren't working with ICE. And guess what? They're ignoring the shit out of her. They're doing whatever the fuck they want anyway. We have proof. Chesapeake, Virginia has already admitted in a FOIA request that they have ongoing contracts paying for ICE to do the work they're doing. This is local taxpayer money that's going to ICE
Ah,
against the executive order of the governor. So when I say this is the time to exercise those civic engagement muscles, to get out to your city council, to make your voice known, because the areas where people, this isn't corporations, this isn't
yeah.
money, when people flood city council meetings, shit changes. That's where flock cameras come down. That's where agreements to not work with ICE are made, is when they see their people speaking out in
Well,
droves.
you saw that that Ring finally, like Amazon Ring, pulled their contract with CBP and DHS.
Right. Which number one, I don't believe. And
I
number
don't believe
two,
it
they
either.
should be punished for ever doing it in the first place. So
Exactly.
the boycott should
So
absolutely
interestingly
stand.
enough, unfortunately, I live in Palm Beach County. Okay, and Rick Bradshaw is the sheriff for Palm Beach County,
Hmm.
right? Really good guy. He's been the sheriff for 20 years. We've had low crime rates. He's a Democratic leaning sheriff. But guess what else is in Palm Beach County that falls under his jurisdiction?
Is Alligator Alcatraz in there?
No, Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago. Oh,
So part of my taxpayer money has been going to Palm Beach Sheriff, which has just been about stretched thin every time President Shit for Pants comes down here,
right.
because he is stressing out the security services for the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office on my fucking dime, right? As a local taxpayer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because it's POTUS, it's automatic detail protection, automatic everything. So I think I've talked about this before in other casts. So like part of this is like totally off topic, but I'm just going to say, so if you look at a map of where Palm Beach County is and Palm Beach International Airport relative to Mar-a-Lago, it's literally like a straight 180-degree line across. But if you go on FlightAware and you just happen to look at PBIA and you look at the takeoff patterns, you're going to see that the planes are now doing this really quick, and they're avoiding Mar-a-Lago over here. Okay.
Ah,
That was early last year after the election. He wrote a new executive order through the FAA to change the takeoff and landing pattern at PBIA so that it avoided Mar-a-Lago specifically.
wow.
So now all the people that live north who bought that property specifically there to be out of the landing pattern and takeoff pattern for PBI,
Right.
right? So now he's pissed off all the millionaires that live on that same
Yeah.
street because now they're getting air traffic over their house.
Yeah.
This is how depraved and sick this shit is. It's like literally the next president needs to write an executive order that literally says the takeoff pattern will be 350 feet above Mar-a-Lago.
Yes.
You're going to buzz that goddamn house every single day.
In perpetuity.
In
Right.
perpetuity. Right.
Because us here in military towns are certainly having increased air traffic with everything going on. We're, we've got squadrons out here practicing. We've got helicopters over, much more activity than
Oh my,
normal. And they
I'm
don't
so sorry
bother
you got to go
flying
through that
a
shit.
decent height above your house. We got the window shaking sometimes.
Oh my God.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but
So,
I mean, this is so what we're really talking about here is, and I want to get back to the national, because this is really the big topic.
yes.
I think it's not even so much that the kids and the measles outbreaks and the numbers are going up, and we're going to see this continue because of what happened with HHS and CDC and the really lousy fucking leadership of the bear eating heroin addict that is now running this agency.
Yep.
But it's more about really, it's this gaping fucking hole. I'm sorry, and I wanted to talk about this. This is real quick. So this was the last state. So we were talking about herd immunity, right? At 95% vaccination rates. Right now, our kindergarten vaccine rate is hovering around 92%. Which is now creating these pockets, which is what you're seeing in South Carolina, what you're seeing in New Mexico, what you've seen in Western Texas, Southern Mississippi, in Central Mississippi, and Alabama, and Kentucky, and Tennessee, and all of these fine people of red state America who keep voting for the same fucktards that are running our country into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we break through this from a public health perspective? I mean, the AMA has been sending out messages. The AFP has been sending out, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Pediatric Medical Association. Every major scientific medical society has stood out against this, and it's literally hitting a wall.
I'll tell you how you do it. Oh, that's easy. You connect money with power. All you have to do is pay their pastors to say what you want them to say. And they will. Pay their pastors. And suddenly the information will be flowing again. I mean, I've been saying that for a long time. You got to go through the same people that propagandized them to begin with, and that began in these houses of worship. So you got to do the same thing. And every one of these pastors has a price, and it ain't even that expensive.
And since when did spouting and being pro-life and speaking the word of God equated to let's kill your kids?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't have an abortion because we want that baby here, but once that baby's here, you're on your own. And I hope
And you
it's in
can't
God's
vaccinate
will
them.
for
And don't
that baby to
vaccinate them.
live. Right. Exactly.
I mean,
Oh
am I
my
the only
gosh,
one with this? Am I the only one with this stupid looking grin on, like the stupid look on my face? Like,
uh-huh.
like,
You're not. It's
like,
absolutely idiotic. It's absolutely idiotic. Yeah. But then they can wrap it. What they wrap everything they can't easily explain is it's God's will. It's God's will.
no, that's not
If your
God's will.
child
That's a
dies,
choice.
it's God's will.
That's
Right.
not God's will. That's a choice you're making. That's
Yeah.
good choices lead to good outcomes, and bad choices lead to bad
Exactly.
consequences. Nobody
Exactly.
told you to to start making crystal meth in your house. Was that God's will too? Right?
Right. It's all choices. It's all
Nobody told you to
choices.
donate your entire life savings to some, TV, lawnmower sales guy pastoring
Right.
around as a mega church.
All right, we're getting to the top of the
Yeah.
hour here. Oh my
Isn't that
gosh.
how an hour goes?
It is. We could talk about this all day, all day. And I've taken so many notes. I always love talking to you because you are so informative. And then I have more stuff to go look up after
We just have to do
to
another show
continue.
soon then.
We will.
I
So
know, right?
maybe we'll make the medical thing a recurring monthly thing because we're gonna need it. As these things get worse and worse, we're going to need it. And we've got a article. Blue Amp has an article coming out of
Yes.
yours on pharmacy benefit managers, right?
Yeah, so this is the tease, everybody. So the impetus behind this article was the fact that my wife got a letter from CVS Caremark, which is one of the largest pharmacy benefit managers in the country, that they are no longer going to be covering one of her medications that she needs to take. And that kind of gave me the impetus to do a little bit of research Friday and Saturday and kind of write this article about these evil fucking people that control the pharmacy pathways, so that when I write a prescription, it's a toll road. It's not even about you going to the pharmacy anymore.
Yeah.
It's about these people who have ultimate control in the commercial space on your prescriptions. and how much you choose to pay.
Right. That's
So,
well, I'm sure your piece will be informative and probably anger me yet again. But it's good. It's good so that we can.
I don't do it on purpose.
No, I know, but we all have to be aware to check this on a recurring basis for ourselves, because I don't want any of our viewers or readers to get caught going to the pharmacy to discover that that medication isn't covered anymore,
And there's
and then
always,
they're up the
listen,
creek in that
I will
moment.
tell people now while you're still watching, I know we're up on the hour, is that there are always alternative ways to get medication if you are unhappy going to the pharmacy and looking at the price that you're getting. There are other cost-saving opportunities. There's other cost-saving measures. You can go back to your primary physician. You can go direct to the company itself. They have usually a direct pharmacy that they contract with to do a direct sale that might be
Yeah,
cheaper than going through CVS or Walgreens or, whoever, Walmart, whatever. But there's always options, and I'll do a show on that once the article hits, and I'll do a live on that. And then, so Melissa, this
that'll
is
be
your,
super helpful.
I'm gonna let you
This
do
is
your
super
plug.
helpful. Oh, well, we want everybody to subscribe to Blue Amp for
Yes.
conversations like this, because, Steve Bannon, I hate that dude, but he was so successful with flooding the zone. That
Yeah.
tactic has clearly been so successful, it makes people not vaccinate their kids and then they die. So, we here on the left have lagged behind in that tactic of flooding the zone. And so that's what Blue Amp, along with everyone else here on Substack, is trying to do, is to get out real information, verified information, whether it's actual data collected by reputable organizations. I can't say the government's collecting that data anymore, but what we're doing is getting this information out to you before you get caught at the hospital or at the pharmacy getting stuck and you're in a moment where you were not provided with information. We want you to have information. And so what we want you to do is take this video and share it. You are part of flooding the zone. Just like Republicans will share any cartoon that's put in front of them, we want you to do the same thing. We want you to have the same behaviors, and we want you to help us flood the zone. And tune back in here. We have shows every single day of the week to give you information. We've got Matt McNeil at 4 every day. We've got me on Monday, Ellie on Friday. Joe Joe Walsh drinks tequila with Cliff on Thursday nights. They get a little silly, but they talk about good information.
But it is
And then of
Cliff.
course it is Cliff.
It is
And
Cliff.
yes. And so we have and then of course our anchor show Amped Up is on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. So put it in your calendars and make it a habit to tune in with us so you can be informed, and we will keep amplifying this message out. I appreciate you so much, Dr. Eric. This has been wildly informative.
Thank you very much. Everybody keep smashing those hearts on Substack for us, please. Thank you. I hope you've been hitting it all day. You can find me on my Substack at drlullove.substack.com. And I also have a new piece coming out. I'm going to start doing a piece on Mondays. It's called Bread of the Week. And so I'm an avid bread maker. So I will be doing a different bread. Probably I'm going to try to do it each week, but it might be like 3 times a month. But I'm going to try to put out a new week. So this week's bread, it's on my Substack. It's a whole wheat rosemary infused round loaf. And there's
You're
a
talking
picture
my
on
language. I love
the
rosemary.
Substack. I will post the picture on Monday, and then I will put the recipe up on Tuesdays.
Awesome.
So
All
that's going to
right.
be the new thing. So not that
Oh,
I'm not busy enough, right? But anyway.
right. Exactly.
Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Melissa, thank you so much for the invite. This was great. I love our one-on-one. This
Absolutely.
is the first time we've really done a
Yes.
one-on-one, and this has been special. And thank you to everybody at Blue Amp for having me on. And everybody, wait for that article hit tomorrow. It will be on my Substack published on Wednesday, but it will be on Blue Amp's published tomorrow. And to thank you for everybody at the team at Blue Amp. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. And Melissa, thank you so much
Yep.
for having me.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. You'll have a good one.